Uncle Jack Doesn't Have Eyes. Story by Worm Glory. I came home from school one day and my mommy and my daddy were sitting at the dinner table with a stranger. He was wearing big sunglasses and was smiling wide with his lips pressed close and tight. My mommy and my daddy were really quiet and they looked tired and empty. My daddy told me that the man was Uncle Jack and he'd be living with us from now on. I knew something was wrong because my daddy didn't have any brothers. Then Uncle Jack took off his glasses and he didn't have any eyes, and I began to scream and cry. But then he put his hand inside my head and I got real quiet too. We lived like that for a while. Mommy and Daddy still had to go to work and I still went to school, but nothing felt like anything. Whenever Uncle Jack saw something he liked in you, he'd take it for himself to keep. He'd take our feelings and our thoughts and our memories. He said it kept him nice and warm. It kept us quiet too. If he thought you were getting a bit of fight in you, he'd slurp it up like a milkshake and then you wouldn't care anymore. He acted like we were family. He'd help do the dishes and ask about my days at school. He'd joke about being a self-made man, but he was the only one laughing. When Mommy left for work at the factory, he'd always hug her goodbye and her face got all funny when he did. Sometimes he'd get mad at us if we got too quiet and cold, even though it was him taking away all our good parts. I learned to never smile. It made him real hungry. He liked my eyes. He'd talk about them a lot, he said.
I reckon you have the prettiest eyes in the whole darn world, my peach.
That's what my daddy used to say, but now Uncle Jack said it instead. I didn't like it. I think he wanted eyes of his own, but he could never manage to take them. He tried a lot though, and he'd get all sullen and mad when it didn't work. He said we were being selfish, hoarding them away from him. I'd have given him both of mine if it would have made him leave. He liked my eyes, but Daddy was his favorite. He'd wear Daddy's clothes, though Uncle Jack was much taller and skinnier. If my daddy said something, Uncle Jack would sometimes repeat it over and over again like a broken record. One time he did it all night, sometimes quiet, sometimes shouting. None of us slept. Then my daddy stopped speaking. At first I thought he wanted Uncle Jack to stop copying his words, but then he started to forget things, even easy things like how to put on clothes. Eventually he just lay in bed. I think Uncle Jack just kept taking more and more from him until there was nothing left. But Uncle Jack was still hungry. He'd stopped paying attention to me and Mommy. He'd just stand next to Daddy's bed for hours and hours, waiting for him to feel something, or want something, or just move. I began to feel things again, but they were all bad. Mama used to read the Bible, and she'd tell us about mortal sins, and how God would send you right to hell for them. I think maybe I'm going to hell. Because I was happy Uncle Jack was standing at Daddy's bed and not mine. I still loved my daddy, but I was so scared. One evening, I was sitting in the kitchen with Mommy, and my daddy walked in. But I knew it wasn't him, because Uncle Jack wore my daddy as badly as he wore his suits. He was smiling real wide, and I guess he was happy because he'd finally got eyes of his own. And he just looked at me and said,
I'm your daddy now.
But he'd made a mistake. He'd stopped feeding on us and my mom had got some fight back in her. She had a gun. She was going to shoot him that night. But she didn't think Uncle Jack would be wearing Daddy when she did. And she started crying and her hands were shaking so bad. Her shot missed. Uncle Jack got so mad. His lips peeled back and he had teeth like a shark, and he jumped on her and started biting her. My mama was screaming and I guess he was so mad. he didn't even make her go quiet. Or maybe he wanted her to feel afraid. But he had made a second mistake, because my mama had dropped a gun. There was blood everywhere. Everything was slippery and wet, and I was also crying, and my hands were shaking so bad. I didn't want to miss, so I got real close and pushed the gun against the back of his head. He froze all of a sudden, and he said,
"What are you doing, Peach?"
It was my daddy's voice, but I knew my real daddy was gone. So I shot him in the head. Testimony of Myra Gavelston, age 7, archive document VAZD223B, dated 12/10/35.